we just have to try and make the best of the situation we've got, because that's a cut that's been agreed by Cabinet. It's been voted through by the Labour group. It's happening. There's nothing we can do about it.
One of the things that bothers me is that we're supposed to be living in a Labour city, but rather nasty notices are going up about rough sleeping rather than housing people. Bristol City Council is putting up notices, this one in Trenchard Street Car Park, saying public notice, rough sleeping, begging and other antisocial behaviour. Now, excuse me, rough sleeping is not antisocial behaviour. It's something that people need to do, and begging is also something that people need to do. But this is an official Bristol City Council notice here. And obviously these sorts of things are hidden out of the way where the rough sleepers sleep. Most people won't see these notices. And it says, so rough sleeping, begging and other antisocial behaviour, crime and disorder will not be tolerated in this car park. Anyone found engaged in these activities will be banned from the premises. If such bans are ignored, Bristol City Council will seek enforcement by way of court orders, a breach of which could lead to a custodial sentence. Bristol City Council recognises that people find themselves in housing difficulty, would encourage individuals to engage with St Mungo's outreach team, who are commissioned to provide assistance if you're rough sleeping. St Mungo's outreach, they give a phone number there and the address at the Compass Centre, 1 Jamaica Street. Members of the public wishing to report rough sleeping can do so. As well, they give a way that people can do that. Now, this all sounds to me, a bit authoritarian, actually. Anyway, Matt, what do you make of notices like this?
Well, I think it's disgraceful, really. I mean, the situation that we're all having to deal with is the massive cuts that have been put through by the Conservative government to welfare and stuff like that, and the reality is there's lots and lots of homeless people. There are people sleeping on the streets, and you're not going to get rid of the problem by being draconian on them. There was this woman the other day that John Langley made a video of her, and she'd been basically just had this notice gaffer taped to her stuff, saying that the Bristol Waste, which is the council waste company, are going to come round and take all her stuff away. And this is people's sleeping bags, stuff that they need to basically stay alive over the sort, at night in the sort of weather that we've.
Yeah, but I suppose what they're saying here is either put your stuff out of the way somewhere, don't bring it into the city centre, and that's reasonable.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it would. There are homeless people all over the city now. I mean, where I live in Bedminster, there are people you never see homeless people there. A few years ago, and then there's constantly people sleeping rough around Bedminster. So people do move out of the city centre. It doesn't make the problem go away.
Anyway, Eleanor, rough sleeping, begging and other antisocial behaviour. What do you make of that?
That's the first I'd heard of that notice. I've made a note to go and investigate that, because that sounds completely out of order and completely out of keeping with what I'm hearing within the council.
But it's okay, because members of the public wishing to report rough sleeping can do so.
Yeah, I mean, there is help there if you happen to be someone who has the right to stay here, if you happen to be someone with British nationality, if you happen to be someone with a connection to the city. If you don't fall into all those categories, then you can phone that number all you like. There's not going to be help there for you. I've spoken to a couple of people who said they've come to Bristol because they've got a job here and they've been homeless because they can't find anywhere that they can afford to rent. They can't find anywhere until they've started work. And they've been collecting money to sleep in a hostel for a week or so before they actually start work. And they've been told, I was talking to a man, he had found a job. He needed to take the tent with him to go and take up that job, which is incredible. Someone sleeping on the streets has managed to organise themselves to find a job. It's an incredible achievement, but that would leave his partner homeless, and the council were not helping them because they didn't have a connection to the city, because they'd been living abroad and they'd only recently moved back. So there's all kinds of ways that you can fail to get that help.
Well, it's all very well going on about the St Mungo's outreach team, but speaking to homeless people, as I've done, a lot of them say, well, too many drugs at St Mungo's. We don't want to be near hard drugs. We need to be away from hard drugs, and violence sometimes. I mean, I'm not saying that this is part of the programme at St Mungo's. Of course it's not. But for many people, it simply doesn't work, Eleanor.
Yes, I was talking to another young man, a really vulnerable young man who had quite strong mental health needs. And he just couldn't be in a hostel. It was too upsetting for him. Even without things breaking out into violence, just the sort of aggression, the loudness of other people in those hostels was just terrifying for him. And he'd ended up sleeping in a shed, sleeping on a building site. He'd been finding places to sleep, none of which was doing any good for the state of his mental health. And there was just a real need for services to wrap around him and stop things getting worse. I mean, I'm really pleased to hear that one of the things that is being looked at in Bristol is this idea of housing first, where rather than waiting until someone has been through the various stages of kind of emergency housing, moving on to different levels of support, and then finally, when they don't need any support and they're able to live independently, then you put them into housing. The idea that you just say, OK, well, let's just solve the problem of housing first. Let's get them somewhere that is their own, where they can stay and be safe. And then you give them all the other support, the mental health support, and really dealing with the trauma that they've been through in the years of being homeless. You do that afterwards, but that you first sort out just a safe place of their own.
But it's OK, because we're going to have an underground. Actually, no, an arena.